What is your reaction to this explosive report? Now, we're purposely not showing her picture. We're not saying her name because, of course, these are just allegations as we speak. But how could it be that we still don't know who this pipe bomber is, the person right there on the screen? It seems this report is kind of putting all the puzzle pieces together, and it makes sense. What do you think?
Well, it's an attempt to. This is one of these things that I would like to see validation or formal cooperation from federal law enforcement before kind of the horse leaves the barn on this. Obviously, there's a lot in this story that I think is what people, consistent with a certain confirmation bias that people, I think, may want to hear. But there's obviously an inside connection to the January 6th pipe bomber. That much is completely clear, not just from the fact that this person was in effectively broad daylight from 7 p.m., a little before 7 p.m. through 8:30, walking on foot for an hour and a half through the home turf of the national security state, talking on cell phones, touching surfaces, making text messages. And then, the bomb was left for 17 hours before it was discovered, right at the site that Kamala Harris went to. In fact, the Justice Department had to revise a bunch of grand jury indictments because it lied to a bunch of grand juries saying Kamala Harris was at the Capitol. And therefore, there was this kind of racialized, terrorism going after the first black female president-elect. And then they had to revise at 10 months after those indictments came in, those grand jury indictments, because it turned out Kamala Harris was actually effectively squatting over the pipe bomb at the DNC headquarters exactly when it was found. So this is, there's so much to this, from the fact that the FBI blocked effectively the investigation. They cut off the cameras before the pipe bomber left the scene. And even this footage you're showing right now, I published about this in 2021. They don't show the person leaving the frame. They cut it off beforehand. They slowed down the DNC camera footage to 1 frame per second so that you couldn't have any sort of continuous motion to even do the gate analysis. But most importantly, they collected 39,000 video files of the January 6th pipe bomber. 39,000, according to, I believe, a CBS report from the end of 2021. And the Biden administration did not update the FBI pipe bomber page ever again after September 2021. Not a single update. Didn't even attempt to put those files public. So one of the things that I think is an interesting next step, for example, if you take this Blaze investigation, is we don't, another curious element of this is the FBI never told us the gender, the race. They have all these color videos of the pipe bomber walking around. And even in videos that I've shown, you can see that the pipe bomber takes off the glasses from time to time, and you can see the glint. It looks like they actually blocked out the eyeballs, so you couldn't do any sort of
massive cover
iris. Right. But the FBI can simply take those 39,000. Think of how powerful this would be. If the FBI took the 39,000 video files that they've compiled and simply put them in a WikiLeaks-style database, just like Tulsi Gabbard did with the JFK files. Put all 39,000 video files. You don't even need to expend the tens of thousands of hours of manpower of FBI time. Crowdsource it. Give us the ability to load those into a video editing software and see what commonalities come out of that. Just to have all the different angles, we might be able to tell, for example, the ethnicity, or the hair color or something that might be able to validate or validate or falsify aspects of what the Blaze just showed.
Right, because the Blaze has a picture, they have a name, and exactly what you're saying, then it would confirm what they're reporting. Do you think it's a coincidence that Nancy Pelosi announced her retirement the same week as this explosive story? We know she famously said, she admitted on tape that it was her fault, that she said no to the National Guard coming there that day, that fateful day. And the Democrats, they love hanging their hat on J6. Anytime we try to say anything about the Democrats, oh, look at what they did during the Summer of Love. Look at the violence. Look at the riots. Look what they do. They always say, oh, look at the insurrection on J6. And then to find out that they're the ones that did all of this, they perpetuated this narrative. I mean, what would this do to the political world? What would this do to President Trump's image, his reputation?
Well, it's astounding. Nancy Pelosi, as the Speaker of the House at the time, was effectively in charge of the Sergeant at Arms and Capitol Security. And probably the most damning piece of footage around Nancy Pelosi that came out was her saying, as the initial perimeter breach at 1 p.m. on January 6th was happening, there was a documentary team filming her. And she jumps with joy. And everyone can find this on YouTube or on X. This was part of this documentary that I believe her daughter was putting together, or some team associated with them. And she says, trespassing on Capitol grounds. I've been waiting for this.
I've been waiting for this, for trespassing on the Capitol grounds.
And that phrase, I've been waiting for this, and then listing the exact crime, which frankly was a misdemeanor, but they piggy frog this into 10-year sentences for people. And technically, it's not even trespassing on Capitol grounds unless a VIP is present. This is another thing: is it's not typically a crime to go onto the Capitol lawn. It was only a crime because there were two VIPs present under secret security detail protection, Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris, as we later learned, wasn't even there. But she listed the exact crime. She jumped for joy and said, I've been waiting for this. Now, to say that I've been waiting for this presupposes some amount of foreknowledge that she knew this was going to happen. And what's very interesting is she was in very prolonged communications with Mark Milley, who then was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Mark Milley had had a private conversation with Gina Haspel on November 9th, a couple days after just one day after the 2020 election, where Mark Milley said to Gina Haspel, I think a right-wing coup is afoot and something needs to be done to stop it. And when the head of the U.S. military says to the head of the Central Intelligence Agency that there's a right-wing coup afoot and we need to do something to stop it, they don't just go back to their desks and sit with their, sit on their hands, twiddling their thumbs. That is usually when a counterintelligence or some sort of operation to infiltrate these right-wing groups is done. And you saw that very day was when you started getting this Oath Keeper organizing, which were one of the militia groups that were, and these are all former military people. You had the U.S., all these former U.S. military people were at the front lines of the breach. It would be very easy to be able to essentially have this thing be hatched by essentially a wing of the U.S. military under the guise of being there to stop it. And then with Nancy Pelosi's foreknowledge, simply ensuring that there was no security and that no one could catch the pipe bomber, which was for months after the event, the thing that made it a near mass fatality event.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And then it turns out the bombs were inoperable. Mike Benz, got to leave it right there. Thank you so much for joining us as we look forward
Upload the 39,000 video files. You'll be a hero. Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, make them public.
I hope they're listening. I hope they're watching. Thank you so much.